Everyone. My name is Robin Siegel, and I'd like to welcome you to our virtual trip to Paris. Federation missions are like none other, filled with new friends, exciting locations, and a chance to visit with Jewish communities around the world. We look forward to being able to travel together in the future, but in the meantime, I'd like to thank Gil Travel for the chance to travel this season in a new way. Being together today helps us stay connected to one another here in Boca Raton and with our Jewish community abroad. We are looking forward to you joining us today as we learn about the neighborhood of La Marais from our Parisian guide, Flora, who I will introduce in a minute. But first, I would like to thank our corporate sponsor, H.J. Sims. The generosity of our corporate partners allow the Federation to host programs like this and others. I would like to thank Jonathan Giroux from H.J. Sims and welcome. Thank you. Before we get started, there are a few housekeeping notes to go over. Your microphone will be muted throughout the program. If you have a question for our guide, please type it into the chat box and I will ask Flora. For those of you a little less familiar with Zoom, you can adjust the way your screen appears. Our recommendation is to select Speaker View, which will highlight the person speaking. You will find this at the top of the Zoom screen. Before our flight takes off for Paris, I'd like to take a moment to tell you a little bit about Jewish Federation of South Palm Beach County. As you may know, Federation takes care of our people from right down the street to across the world. Through the annual campaign, our Federation raises and allocates funds to its partner agencies and provides critical assistance to those in need. Today is not a fundraising event, but a gift of any size is greatly appreciated. During the month of March, every new or increased gift to our 2021 Jewish Federation of South Palm Beach County annual campaign will be matched dollar for dollar. Now, more than ever, our local and global Jewish community is counting on us. Here are just some of the ways you help our Jewish family near and far face unprecedented challenges in the face of COVID-19 during 2020. You help keep our frail elderly, unable to safely go out, secure and comforted with full, nutritious meals at home. You are a lifeline for families facing income loss and overwhelming stress with emergency financial help and mental health services. You bring new immigrants from around the world to safety from anti-Semitism, destitution, broken infrastructures, and the pandemic to a new life in Israel. You bring virtual joy, creativity, and learning to children and adults with developmental disabilities during long days in their homes. You keep health and hope alive for our impoverished brothers and sisters with emergency and ongoing aid in worsening conditions across Europe, Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Please help us to continue meeting these needs and make your gift today. Together, we will thrive through these challenging times and build a more resilient future. Thank you. So now, through the magic of Zoom, I'd like to welcome you to Paris and introduce Flora Goldenberg. Flora was born to a Parisian Jewish family and bred in the La Marais neighborhood, the heart of the Jewish quarter of Paris. Flora feels very close to her Jewish origins and history and follows in the footsteps of her mom, who is also a Jewish tour guide. Flora is a graduate of the Paris Sorbonne University and has created a series of interesting one-of-a-kind experiences, combining her expertise in art, her passion for Jewish culture, and her love for her city, Paris. I am delighted now to turn it over to Flora to lead us on a tour through the neighborhood of La Marais. Good morning, Flora.
Good morning and good morning, everyone. So I'm very happy to be here with you today. Thank you, Robin, for the introduction. And I will have to be wearing this mask today during our tour because of the pandemic. But as I am in the park right now, I'll take a few minutes to unveil my face so that you can actually see me a little bit better for a few minutes. And I'm very happy to be taking you to Paris today through Le Marais, which is the Jewish area. And we'll start our tour here in a beautiful place, which is a beautiful garden in the heart of the Jewish quarter. let's put this back on. And so we'll start today our tour in a place which is a park located in the heart of the Jewish quarter, which is in district number 4 in Paris. So maybe, Jared, if you can put the picture number 1, the map of Paris, so that people can see where we are in the city. For those of you who don't know Paris, we are right now in the very center of the city in district number 4. So that's where the number 4 is written near the Seine River. And the Marais area, the Jewish neighborhood in Paris, is in the district number 4, but it's also the whole area of district number 3. Now, it's important for you to know that Le Marais that we are going to see today is a place that has a very long history. And I'll try to introduce and start this tour with a little bit of history about Le Marais, because you should know that Le Marais in French means swamps. As you can see, the number 4 district is right near the Seine River, which means that it's an area in Paris that was flooding a lot in the past before walls around the river were built. And that's why it took its name from the flooding, from the swamps. So we are standing in an old swamp in the city. And if you look at the picture number 2, Jared, if you can put the picture number 2, you can see an old map of Paris. And you will be able to see on that map the city in the Roman times when the left bank was built by the Romans, the island as well. But on the other side of the river, the Marais, the swamps, was not built at all because it was too close to the Seine River. And there was a dead arm of the Seine River going around the swamps. So it was flooding all the time. And this is why for many, many centuries, nobody lived in the Marais. And it was an area not occupied by anybody except a few monasteries. The Catholic Church had a couple of places here. They would grow vegetables. They would bring their cows to eat the very fresh grass of Le Marais, of the swamps. And that was about it. The Marais, the area, will start to be built more and more starting in the 15th century. And it will know its golden, it will go through its golden ages in the 17th century. Thank you for the picture, Jared, for the moment, it's good. So right now we are actually in a beautiful place where you can see here a beautiful house in this garden, a private mansion that was built in the 17th century in the golden ages of Le Marais, when Le Marais was occupied by the aristocrats, these very wealthy people who built beautiful homes. So this was one house, one big aristocrat family, and you can see that they had also these private gardens that are today public gardens, shared gardens. So this used to belong to one family. And here in Le Marais, you can find lots, dozens of them. So it gives you a little idea of the architecture that you could find here in the 17th century. So let's get back to the history of Le Marais and how it became a place for the Jews to live in. So here in Le Marais, in the swamps, in the very beginning of the Middle Ages, the Jews already lived here because they came in Paris when the Romans arrived as well. And when they came, they settled on the left bank, on the island, and here in Le Marais. They will stay here until the 14th century. So through the Middle Ages, we will have a lot of anti-Judaism in Paris. Due to the fact that the Jews were accused of betraying Jesus, they were accused of not being from the right religion, with Christianity becoming bigger and bigger in France and all around Europe, the Jews will start to be persecuted very much. As you can see on picture number 3, if Jared can put the picture number 3, you'll see one of the many persecutions that was organized against the Jews. So on that picture that you will see very soon, the number 3, you will see how the Jews were expelled from Paris. They were from France. They were expelled from the kingdom by King Philip August. So if we can have that picture of the Jews expelled, yes, thank you, that would be great. So you can see on the left-hand side, the king wearing a crown who is pointing at the Jews and he's pushing them away from the country. The reason why is because also most of them were bankers at the time and a lot of people were owing them money, which means that they didn't like them for that. And so the king decided to expel them. This way he could take all their belongings and he didn't owe money to the Jews anymore. You can recognize the Jews on that picture because of the yellow circle that they have around the waist. This was called la rouelle. It was a sign of discrimination that was that the Jews were obliged to wear since the 13th century by King Saint Louis, Louis IX. And it was yellow because in the Middle Ages, most of the people were not able to read. So they could read pictures and they could easily know what the colors meant. So for them, it was pretty clear that yellow is the color of betrayal, the color of the stranger. And this is how they were able to recognize the Jews wherever they went. And this is also why Hitler later chose the yellow star. It's not something that he invented. It's something that started in Europe in the Middle Ages to mark the Jews. So after they were expelled in the 12th century by King Philip August, they were eventually allowed to come back, but not for a very long time. They were expelled again about 20 years later. And about every 20 years, the Jews were expelled and then they came back and they were expelled and then they came back until 1394. In 1394, the Jews will be expelled for good. And they will not have the right to come back to France until the French Revolution in 1789. So for about 400 years, the Jews don't have the right to live in France anymore from 1394 to 1789, the French Revolution. So to give you an idea, it's before the Spanish Inquisition in the 1400s. Of course, these expulsions happened in other countries in Europe. France was just the first one basically to start the expulsions, but it will happen in many other countries as well. And the anti-Judaism became so strong at some point in Europe. Many Jews left to Eastern and Central Europe and didn't stay in Western Europe. So thank you very much for the picture there, Jared. For now, this is good, thank you. So the reason why we are standing here also today is because we are in a park where the Jews were living before they were expelled in 1394. And one of the reasons why they came to settle here is because in this place, we are actually outside of the old city of Paris. What you can see in front of us right now, this piece of a round tower here is a piece of the first city wall that was built around Paris in the 12th century. So at that time, the Jews were not allowed to come back to the city of Paris, but they were only allowed to come back outside of the city walls. It was a way for the king to ask them to pay taxes each time they were coming in and out the city. So that's how they started to live beyond that wall in places outside of Paris, but they would go in Paris to work every day and they would pay taxes each time they would enter the city of Paris. So after the expulsions in 1394, the Jews will not live in France for about 400 years. So of course, there are a few exceptions. As you can imagine, some Jews who, for example, were still in Paris, they were practicing Judaism in secret, but it was not ideal. And most of them left. In the meantime, the Marais became this beautiful place with private mansions built by the aristocrats. In the time of the French Revolution in 1789, everything is going to change for the Jews. The reason why is because of the three main words of France that we have today: liberty, equality, brotherhood, which means that everybody is equal, everybody is a citizen, everybody has the same rights. So it's a time for emancipation for everybody, and of course, the Jews as well. So since 1789, the Jews will start to come back in France because they have rights, because they have liberties. Since they have liberties, it means that they can settle as normal citizens. And it will be the first country in all of Europe to give so many rights and so much freedom to the Jews. So about 10 years after the beginning of the French Revolution, we think that there were about 3,000 Jews back in Paris. And when they came back to Paris, they settled here in Le Marais. The reason why is because of these private mansions, like the one I was showing to you just now, because these houses built for the aristocrats, well, they became empty and abandoned because the aristocrats were beheaded during the French Revolution. So they were either beheaded or they escaped from France. And when they did, their houses were empty and abandoned, which was ideal for the Jews because they can come and settle in these mansions. So that's why when the Jews come back, they settle in Le Marais area. and they would split these houses into many different apartments. And it was also great because in the back, like here in the gardens, you could have workshops. In the front of the house where you had a courtyard, you could have their shops where they would sell what they were making. So the Marais became a Jewish area in the 18th century, and it will also become a working class and craftsman area until very recently. So as we will see a little bit later, the Marais will go through many changes until today. Today, it's a very gentrified neighborhood, which is also the Jewish historical neighborhood of Paris. It is also the gay area, very hip, very trendy place in Paris. It's a place where you can see lots of very old architecture, for example, from the Middle Ages until 17th century and even more modern today. So it's a place very eclectic where people come for so many reasons, and we'll try to discover all of this today together. So first, I'm going to take you towards the Rue De Rosier, which is the main Jewish street in Le Marais. So the Marais is still considered the heart of the historical area in Paris. It's an area where the Jews have lived for so many years. We can still see where the Jews lived. You can still see places like synagogues, Jewish schools, and of course, many restaurants. And it's a place where people like to come today because of its shops, as it's a very trendy area. So one of the first signs that we can see here about the Jewish presence is a plaque, which is here at the entrance of the gardens. That's the name of the garden. You can see it's named Joseph Mignoret. The gardens were actually named after a man who was a righteous among the nations and a resistant. He was also a former director and teacher in a school where a lot of Jewish kids were going. And he became a righteous among the nations in 1990 for all the help that he provided to the Jewish families in this area, but also to some Jewish kids who were at his school. Unfortunately, he was not able to help all the children of the school. And some people say that when he died in 1949, it's also because of the sadness of not seeing so many of them coming back. To remember the children, the Jewish children in this neighborhood who disappeared, you have also here at the entrance of the gardens next to the name of Joseph Mignoret, a commemorative plaque to remember all these young children. So you can see here, for example, their names. Bert Alter, 5 years old. Charlotte Alter, 4 years old. Thérèse Abraham, 9 months old. Bernard, you can see their names, first names, last names, and age. So you can see that a lot of them were very young, just a few years old. And this is because we have commemorative plaques to remember the children in front of the schools where they went. But for the ones who didn't go to school yet, it was important to have these in the parks. It says at the very beginning, arrested by the police of government of Vichy and the Nazis, more than 11,400 children lived in district number 4. Sorry, more than 11,400 children were deported from France from 1942 to 1944 and murdered in Auschwitz because they were born Jewish. More than 500 of these children lived in district number 4. Among them, 100 were so young they didn't get the chance to go to school yet. So here are their names to remember them. So we'll talk about, of course, what happened in France during the war. And here you can see arrested by the police of Vichy government. It means that the French government collaborated with the Nazis and was responsible for deporting a lot of these children, especially when they were rounded up here in the streets of Le Marais. So we'll talk also about the deportees and what happened to the Jews during the war when we get to the Holocaust Memorial. But I really wanted to show you the name of this man because we'll talk about him again a little bit later, as we will be going by the school where he used to teach and where he was a director. So right now we are heading outside of the gardens, and I am going to take you to the street Rue De Rosier, which is a very beautiful old street. La Rue de Rosier means the street of the roses, like the flowers. So its name is coming from the fact that it was a street where a lot of flowers were growing, since it was just outside of the city walls. And so all the roses, the climbing roses, were growing on the wall. Now I'm going to show you a very special place here, which marks the arrival of the Jews in the Rue De Rosier and in the Marais after the 18th century. So after the Jews were allowed to come back in the time of the French Revolution, they started to settle in Le Marais. And then a very important wave of Jewish immigration arrived here in the 18th century, but mostly in the 19th and 20th century when the Jews came from Eastern Europe and from Central Europe. When the Jews were persecuted in Poland, in Russia, a lot of them hear about France and the fact that here we give liberties to the Jews and the Jews are emancipated. So many of them want to come to France. And so that's how they arrive in Le Marais and they start opening their shops and restaurants. So a little bit later, in the beginning of the 20th century, it was time for my family to come here in Le Marais. And here in front of us, you can see a yellow shop, which is a clothing store, which actually used to be my grandfather's restaurant. So Jared, if you can show the picture number 4, which is a black and white picture where you'll see my my old grandfather's restaurant. So first, it was a Jewish epicery that Joseph Goldenberg, my grandfather, you can see him in white on the picture, decided to take over after the war. But it actually started before the war when my great-grandfather came here in Le Marais, and they arrived from Turkey, directly from Turkey. So he opened a delicatessen specialized in Jewish food from Eastern Europe because originally they were from Russia. And after the war, my grandfather Joseph decided to take over the restaurant and to turn it into a bigger restaurant and epicery right here. So Jared, if you can show the picture number 5, you can see how this place used to look like when it was my grandfather's restaurant. So this way you'll have both the place and how it looks right now, and this is how it looked before. This is the exact same location and the name written on its front. It's a restaurant which became sadly famous because in 1982, my father was actually in the restaurant when a group of terrorists from Lebanon arrived at the restaurant and they killed 6 people and injured 22 of them because it was such an important symbol of the Jewish neighborhood. It was an act of terrorism, which was clearly anti-Semitic. And you could hear still about it today because since the attacks, they didn't caught the terrorists. So since 1982, until very recently when they discovered that some of them were hiding in Norway and in Jordan. And actually one of them is going through, well, they're actually the justice is going through the process of extraditing one of the terrorists to finally have justice for the ones who died in the attacks. So you can see here, if I go a little bit closer to the restaurant, well, to the walls of the former restaurant, a commemorative plaque to remember the attacks. So it says an anti-Semitic attack that happened here on the 9th of August, 1982 in Goldenberg restaurant, where 6 people died and 22 people were injured. And here are the names of the people who perished in the attacks. So today it's a clothing store because unfortunately the restaurant had to close in 2002. But the facade of the building looks the same as it used to be because this is how the Marais is protected today. By law, you are not allowed to change the facades on the building, so you have to protect the historical buildings. And this is why on the side of the building here, you can still see Goldenberg written in big letters on the side of where the restaurant used to be. So my family is just one of the many examples of these Jewish families who came first from Eastern Europe, sometimes like my family going through Turkey until they arrived in France and in Paris. And when they settled in Paris, they could find here everything that they were not able to find in other places. And one of these things was the big organization called the Consistoire that Napoleon Bonaparte decided to start for the Jews after the end of the French Revolution. In 1808, he decided to gather the Jews in the City Hall of Paris to ask them a lot of questions, especially to the rabbis, about Jewish life, the synagogues, the rabbis, the Jewish schools. And this way he was able to know what the Jewish people needed. And this way he could also make their presence here official. And it was for the Jews the first time in their lives in Europe that they had an organization that was officially representing them in front of the state. So it means that they can start to really live here as free citizens, but also they can start a real life. They can become French citizens, and they can start building also a lot of synagogues if they want, because they are going to stay here for quite a long time. Now, we have in France and Paris different waves of Jewish immigration. Of course, the wave of Jewish immigration from Eastern and Central Europe was the biggest before the Second World War. But after the war in the 1950s and 1960s, there will also be a new wave of immigration of Jews from North Africa. So here I'm standing in front of a bakery called Murciano, which represents this immigration of Jews from North Africa. This is a bakery that was opened by a family from Morocco. And the Jews from Morocco, from Tunisia, and from Algeria arrived in France in the 1950s and in the 1960s, because those countries were French colonies that became independent. And the easiest place for them were to come was France, because lots of them were already speaking French, and also because lots of them already had the French citizenship. So when they came, they brought their traditions, they brought their pastries, their songs, culture. So here you can see also how they adapted to the French culture by starting to make the chocolate croissant, the croissant, delicious chocolate croissant here. But they also adapted to the rogalef, for example, which you can see here, for the Ashkenazi Jews who were still in this area. And they decided also to bring their own traditions. So they were making pastries, food for everybody in this area. And still today, it is an important thing to mention, to point out, because this is one of the reasons why so many people like to come and travel to Paris. And when they come to walk through the Marais, because of its cultural diversity and because of so many good things to try. The food is really one of the reasons why Rue De Rosier is the one like must-seen places in Paris right now. So right now we are still on Rue De Rosier. As you can see, it's a very beautiful paved street, which is from the 18th century. It has looked this way since the 18th century, and we're going to stop very soon in front of another place where there is one of the many synagogues of Paris. It's right here where that man is standing. So it doesn't really look like a synagogue from the outside, as you can see. It's a front door of a building, very simple building, quite beautiful, which is from the 18th century. Right there. So here inside of this building is a synagogue, which is a very important synagogue. Jared, you can show the picture number 6 and 7 inside of the synagogue. So this is how it looks inside of the synagogue on the first floor inside of this building. So this is known as the oldest synagogue in all of Paris. It has been here since the 18th century, since the Jews arrived in Paris after the French Revolution. So back then they didn't believe that they could spend a lot of money building synagogues because they were afraid that they were going to be expelled again. So they thought it was maybe better to turn, an apartment into a synagogue. So this way, if they had to go again, they didn't spend too much money in it. But it's still here because the Jews were able to stay. And so today, it's a very famous synagogue of the Lubavitch movement, the Chabad, that belongs to the Chabad. So it's always quite open, so people can go in and out as they want. If they come, for example, from different countries and come traveling to France, they come here in Rue De Rosier. They can go to the synagogue for prayers, for high holidays. They have Shabbat services. They have Milan. And it's also a very famous place worldwide for the Jewish community because it's here that the great Rabbi of Brooklyn, Schneerson, the Rabbi, came to Dublin when he was studying at the Sorbonne University. As maybe some of you know, he came to Paris and studied here for a couple of years at the same university where I went. So feel very honored that I studied at the same university as him. And so it's still a very dynamic and lively synagogue. As we are making our way through the Rue De Rosier, maybe this is a time, if there are any questions, where I can take one or two questions already. Robin, I don't know if we have any. If not, I can continue.
Well, yes, actually, somebody asked a question. If you could please repeat the name of the organization created in 1808 by Napoleon for the Jews.
Yes, of course. So it's the name of the organization is Consistoire. It cannot really be translated in English. It would be the consistory. Consistory or consistoire in French, you would write it C-O-N-S-I-S-T-O-I-R-E, consistoire. And it's very unique. There are only few in Europe like this one. It's an organization to represent the Jews, which means that back then, the Jews would actually get money from the state to build their synagogues because it was a Jewish organization, which was also a state organization. So today, as we have the separation in between the state and the church in France, they don't get money from the state anymore, but the organization still exists and they represent the majority of the Jews in France today. It's a pretty conservative organization, which is also modern Orthodox, because here in France, we don't really have both. So they would basically be the modern Orthodox movement and conservative. And most of the synagogues and most of the Jews in France today belong to that organization. Of course, also we have Reformed and Orthodox movements, but they're a bit smaller. And it's also very important to keep in mind that when Napoleon was building this organization, he was asking the Jews a lot of questions about how kosher the food should be, how the synagogues were going to be built, how you become a rabbi. For example, another question he was asking them was if the Jewish women were allowed to marry non-Jewish guys. What if it's the other way around? And as you maybe know, where you have two Jews, there are always three opinions. So not all of the Jews agreed on the answers, and that's why the consistoire became the main movement. But we also had, other branches of Judaism that started from there. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you.
Did we have another question?
We're of course getting a lot of questions and comments asking about the climate for Jews in Paris and in France in general, about anti-Semitism, about, do people feel safe and those types of things. So I don't know if you want to address that now or maybe later on.
I will probably answer this just in a few minutes. I will, if everybody agrees with it, I will keep walking a little bit more. I will show you just a couple more places, and then on our way to the Holocaust Memorial, I will explain a little bit more about anti-Semitism today, and I will answer all these questions.
Thank you.
So right here, I'm standing in front of a very famous place. For those who've been to Paris, they know how popular it is. It's called L'As du Falafel, which is the Ace of Falafel. It's a Jewish restaurant that sells food from Middle East, which is a restaurant specialized in falafel sandwiches, which is usually always crowded and busy with tourists, but also locals. So today is a very special day, as it was since last Friday, because as maybe some of you heard, in France, we still are pretty deep into the pandemic right now. So a lot of shops are closed. We are not allowed to go over 10 kilometers outside of our home. So a lot of people cannot come because they live far from the Marais, for example. So that's why it's not as busy as it is usually, but you can believe me, usually the lines here are huge just to grab falafel. So this is one of the many Jewish restaurants that we can still see in the Marais area. And it's not the only one. The reason why is because the Marais became a very gentrified place where people like to come to eat the good Jewish food. And this is also one of the reasons why so many Jewish people moved to other neighborhoods in Paris, So it doesn't mean that they left France or that they left Paris for good, but Le Marais just became too expensive. But it's such an attractive place for tourists and people to discover the streets of Le Marais. A lot of restaurants and Jewish places can still open because they know they're gonna have visitors. They know people are gonna come. So that's how other Jewish restaurants and places are still opening. Now, Jared, if you can show the picture number 8, you will see that right here, Rue De Rosier. This is on the picture how it looked before. You have a beautiful picture of that same exact street before the war in the 1920s, 1930s. So you can see it didn't change much. The one thing you can notice on this picture is that a lot of people around were living a quite simple life. There were lots of simple shops around, lots of simple restaurants. Lots of the Jews who came here were not speaking French, but Yiddish. So when they were coming from their countries, they decided to open their shops to become craftsmen, to work with their hands, because they couldn't easily assimilate to the French companies or the French culture. And so that's how they gathered here in Le Marais. And it's a place which is known for its Yiddish culture and its Yiddish food or all kind of specialties. So for example, here in front of us, thank you for the picture. You can see another of these quite famous places, a bakery, Pasta Finkelstein, known also as the Yellow Shop. That is, as it says on here on its front, specialized in Yiddish sandwiches and other Yiddish pastries or Jewish food. You can see that everybody is getting ready for Passover as well. This is one place that opened just after the war in 1946. Here, cakes for Passover also. Specialties are Yiddish. And to remember the Yiddish influence of the Marais and how so many Jews came from Eastern Europe here, you can see this plaque that was done very recently by an artist who is a Hungarian artist who wrote the name of the plateau in Yiddish. The plateau would be the Yiddish name for the little square. The little square was probably the square right here in front of the Jewish bookstore, or maybe the next one that we are going to see in front of a school. So it's nice, written in Yiddish here, Le Plateau, Rue De Rosier, district number 4, in front of a beautiful wall of street art to remember all the people who came in the 19th century and 20th century from Eastern Europe. Now, one of the questions that I sometimes get from people traveling to Paris is, where are the Stolperstein? If some of you know what these are, maybe you travel to Italy or to Amsterdam and you saw some of these stones. Jared, if you can show the picture number 9. This way, for those who don't know what they are, you can see an example of the Stolperstein. There are these stones that you can find sometimes in front of the entrances of the buildings with the names of the Jews who lived in these buildings who were deported during the war. Well, here in Paris, we don't have them for a simple reason. It was decided that it's not considered, how can I say it? It's not considered okay to walk on the top of those when you are going in and out a house. So that's why we have a different way to remember the Jews who lived in the buildings in the street of Le Marais, if these Jews were unfortunately deported. So thank you for the picture. I'll show you now here what you can find on the top, on the front of some of the doors. So this is on the top of one of the buildings at number 27, where a Jewish family used to live. So you can see a commemorative flag that says, here lived Baruch and Dora Matikensky and their daughter Esther, 9 years old, deported in 1942 by the Nazis with the active complicity of the Vichy government. And they were exterminated in Auschwitz because they were born Jewish. So we have also these commemorative flags, but usually you will find them not on the floor, not on the street, but above the buildings. So we are now walking towards a school. I really wanted to show you one place before we head to the Holocaust Memorial. On the way there, right here in front of us, you can see a beautiful Jewish bookstore, which is specialized in Jewish artifacts, Jewish books. You can see here beautiful menorahs and chandeliers and lots of books for children as well. You can see the mezuzahs are here outside the door. And we are heading towards the square where there is a school, which is very special. It's still a school, it's a public school, but it's a school where a lot of Jewish kids used to go before the war for one simple reason. It's a school that was the first one since the 19th century that was open every day except on Saturdays. You should know that in France before, kids were going to school every day except on Thursdays and Sundays. Because so many Jewish people came to settle here in Le Marais, it was decided that one school at least should be open every day except on Saturdays. And this is the school that is still a public school. Unfortunately, as you can see on this commemorative plaque, 260 Jewish children from that school were deported during the Second World War and exterminated in the Nazi camps. So today, they make a very important work here to remember them. And here you have another plaque dedicated to Joseph Mignoret, the same name as the one we saw at the entrance of the park before, the teacher and director of the school who helped dozens of Jewish children to be saved from the deportation. So it's a very unique school that became the one school where so many Jewish kids used to go in Le Marais. Now I'm going to show you one more thing here, which is very special. It is a portrait of a man, and I really wanted to tell you about him. Here is his face. It was made very recently by a street artist. His name was Samuel Milo, a donor, a survivor from the Nazi camps, 1925-2020. His face is here because when he was young, he used to go to that school that we just saw, and he was able to survive from Auschwitz, even though he was deported in 1942. After 982 days of deportation, he came back. And when he came back, he discovered that his whole family had been deported, except one of his sisters. So 5 of his brothers and sisters plus his parents had been deported. He came back to Paris, and then he found his teacher, Joseph Mignoret, from that school. And he decided to fight his whole life to make sure that he would be recognized as the righteous among the nations for all the people and children that he helped. And then he decided to come back here a lot after the war until last year when he died in March 2020, because he wanted to make sure that we would always remember his friends from his old school. And thanks to him in 2019, the square was named after the 260 children deported during the war. So Milo Donner was also a very important man who gave his testimony at the Holocaust Memorial a lot, because he always said that it was very important for him to talk about what he went through and what happened to the Jews during the war. And he continued talking about his life and his experience during the war until very late. And when he died at 94 years old, he was still able to sometimes, meet with children at the Holocaust Memorial. So right now we are going to walk towards the Holocaust Memorial. On the way, I will show you a few places, but maybe that will be a good time also to answer a few questions. So I guess, Robin, that would be about anti-Semitism. Can you maybe read me one or two questions that you received about?
Okay, we have other ones as well, but if you'd like to go there, that would be terrific. So yes. Some of the questions, surround how safe do Jews feel in the La Marais, in Paris, in France right now in general, with the right wing gaining strength, is there any backlash to the Jewish community?
Okay. Do you have other questions related to the same The
Yeah, a
same
lot of that.
question? Yeah.
And I have another question about what percentage of the residents of the Marais now, were Jewish and how many live there now?
Okay. So, well, to start with this one question about the number of people who are still Jewish in Le Marais, it's really hard to answer because it's a question we cannot really answer, thinking of the fact that during the war, the French government decided to register the Jews. And so today it's not allowed to register, who is Jewish and who isn't. For example, when someone gets to move in and out of place, or when they register at the city hall of the new district where they live, which means that it's very difficult to know. And it would be very difficult to know. So because if they don't belong to a community, to a synagogue, you cannot really tell. But for sure, right now, a lot of the Jewish families who lived here don't live here anymore. So people like myself, we still get to live here because our parents or grandparents had an apartment here, and they kept it through the war and until today, even though the rents became very, very expensive. But most of the Jewish families, which means most of the not so wealthy Jewish families or big Jewish families who have a lot of children and need a lot of rooms in an apartment, they had to move to other neighborhoods, but not very far from here. Maybe Jared, if you can show the picture 1 again, map of Paris, because we can see on that map that you have the Marais where we are, district number 3 and 4. On the right side of them, you have district number 11, 20, 19. That's where a lot of Jewish families live today. They just went a little bit more east or north of Paris, where it's more affordable to live. But a lot of them still commute here every day for the synagogues, because sometimes they like to go to the synagogue where their family used to belong. And also because they work here sometimes, or because of the yeshiva. There is quite a big yeshiva here in the heart of Le Marais. The wealthiest Jews live in Paris in the 16th arrondissement on the very west side of Paris, or in the suburbs. So that, I hope, answers the questions about how many Jews still live here. But maybe as we were walking around, some of you noticed that we could see a lot of Jewish people with their black hats. So that's also something that is interesting. A lot of them commute here every day for, practical reasons, because that's where they study, because that's where they work. So even though they don't live here, you can still see lots of Jewish, quite vibrant Jewish life here. So thank you for the pictures. Now, right here, we are walking by Milan. For those who know the name of that restaurant, it was opened by an Israeli chef from Tel Aviv. So as we are walking by it, it's very successful. And we are also walking by 2 more places that I'll show you before I answer the next questions about anti-Semitism. Here I'll see a new restaurant specialized in pastrami sandwiches. The orange bright sign that you can see next to it means that it's a kosher restaurant. And 2 more places right here, you can see another synagogue. So it's not a big synagogue, it's a small one. Foundation Roger Fleischmann, created in 1931 to remember the young Roger Fleischmann. He studied medicine and also the Torah, and when he died, he was young, at 19 years old. His family decided to build a small synagogue to remember him. It's still a synagogue today, even though it was built for the Fleischmann family, which was an Ashkenazi family. It's today more dedicated to the Sephardic tradition, because so many Jews came from North Africa in the 1950s and 1960s. They needed places where to go and daven. And so many of these synagogues were not empty, but quite abundant, because so many Jews didn't come back after the war. And lots of them also traveled to Israel or to the United States. The consistoire decided to turn the synagogues from the Ashkenazi to the Sephardic tradition. And still an open synagogue where you can go for Jewish holidays. They have services for every Jewish high holidays and also for Shabbat. Now here you can see another place right in front of us, a kosher pizza place. Very good pizza. It was one of the synagogues also that we had here in Le Marais. Unfortunately, this one had to close. And as you can see from the outside, it was the smallest synagogue in all of Paris, not very big. Where you see the TV, that's the end of the room already. So it was really tiny. All right, so walking down that street on the way to the Holocaust Memorial, I'm going to try to explain as much as I can about the situation of the Jews right now in Paris and France, and how the Jews feel about anti-Semitism and how it is being Jewish in France or in Le Marais. So of course, I will try to answer with my personal opinion. So I don't expect anybody to, have the same opinion as me. So what I can say for sure, as a Jew in Paris, you don't really feel threatened every day. Just coming around here and walking through the streets, you could notice lots of people live their lives in a very normal way. So they don't feel like they're going to be attacked because they're wearing a kippah or because they are wearing a black hat or anything like this. And I also want to say that you should know, since 1982 and the attack that happened at my grandfather's restaurant, there was no other terrorist attack here in the Marais that was against the Jews. So that's something important also to mention. Now, it feels pretty safe also knowing that here there are a lot of policemen, of course, because of security problems in general in the world. So sometimes you see them, sometimes you don't because they're undercover, and there are dozens and dozens of security cameras. So people feel pretty safe. Now about the anti-Semitism in France, in Europe, you cannot deny that there was always anti-Semitism since the Middle Ages and until today. It didn't change much, which is sad, of course, when you think about the fact that people didn't really move on from blaming the Jews for everything that was going wrong in their lives. And so that's still here for sure. But one of the things about anti-Semitism today, if it feels bigger when we read about it and when we hear about it, it doesn't really feel bigger as being a Jew living in France. To explain what I mean, for sure, if you go on the internet, you read a lot about anti-Semitism. You can read a lot about different attacks that can be happening. But in my opinion, it's also because nowadays we get to talk a lot more about anti-Semitism than before. Probably that the generation of my parents and grandparents didn't feel like talking as much about it as we do today, also because it was more painful for them after all they remembered. But I feel like it's also because we hear more about it that we feel like there is more. And for sure, one of the important thing as well, the violence that you see on the internet, that you read on the internet, is very, very big. But the acts of violence, there are not as many as what people can do behind the screen. So in the everyday life, it's not like it's happening every day or like you cannot be Jewish walking around Paris. But I don't want to deny again that there is anti-Semitism, that Jews are being attacked around France just for the reason that they are Jewish. And one thing that people also mixed up a lot with is the war that existed in between Israel and Palestine in France and in Europe. In general, most of the countries in Europe are against Israel and they are pro-Palestinian side. So of course this doesn't help, and people believe that the Jews of France or the Jews in Europe should be punished for what happened in Palestine. So that's one important point. And some people would say that it's the new anti-Semitism that is hidden behind the anti-Israel politics. So for sure, that's the major problem today. And I hope that one day people will be able to, first deal with their problems here before they deal with the problems all around the world in countries where they've never been. So that's one important thing. And also the very strong extreme right hand in politics doesn't help either. For sure, with economical problems and the crisis, people tend to look towards the right wing in politics more. And the easy solution is to say that everybody who is different from them should go away to fix their problems. And of course, that would mean the Jews, but that would also mean the Arabs, the blacks, all the people who, for the very nationalist people, don't belong here. So that's a problem too. And Jews were many times like named by the nationalist French people. But so far it is big, but you can't really say that we are feeling the repercussions right now on the Jewish life in France or in Paris. So that's, I hope, some of the answers I can give. But if you have more questions about what I said or about it, please don't hesitate to read them to me.
Okay, thank you so much. Yes, because I know sometimes it's overwhelming what you see in the media, and the actual, day-to-day feels very different. So thank you for sharing that perspective with us.
Of course, so my pleasure. But once again, it's my opinion, and I hope this is just a little bit of my experience and what I feel like about being Jewish in Paris. So yeah, I just only can hope that everything will get better and better regarding the situation with the Jews here in France. Did you have any other questions about anti-Semitism or anything else?
Well, somebody just asked if there were a lot of people who were considering leaving France and either coming to Israel or the United States because of the feeling that, their business or any kind of anti-Semitic feelings.
Yeah, so this is also an important question. During the last, I would say, 5 to 10 years, a lot of Jewish people decided to move to Israel. That's true, a couple of thousands every year. But it's important to know that these numbers are not quite real, because among a few thousand, let's say 3,000 Jews living for Israel on 1 year, about half of them do come back to France. There are many reasons why. My family is a really good example for all this. For example, my mother, she became an Israeli citizen a few years ago. She decided to move to Israel with my stepfather. She works in Israel. She has a whole life in Israel, but she likes to come back to France about 4 to 5 months every year, because she feels very, attached to France, and her roots are also here. And that's what happens for most of the Jews, French Jews, who moved to Israel. Same thing with my father. He also spends about 6 months in France every year and 6 months in Israel. So that's what a lot of French people do. What happens is that many French Jews move to Israel. Then they feel like they don't speak Hebrew, or they can't really assimilate to the new culture of the country where they arrived. Some of them feel like they cannot really find a job that pays as much as what they were doing in France. So a lot of them eventually come back, or they keep working in France and they go to Israel for leisure a little bit more. And also a lot of Jewish French people like to go to Israel to retire, but they also come back to France. And usually they like to keep a house or an apartment in France to be able to commute back and forth. And it's very important, because when they become Israelis, a lot of them don't give up their French citizenship, and they still have a real life based in France as well. So it's kind of a little bit of both. And that's what I felt regarding a lot of Jewish people here in France. A lot of them don't feel like making the step, going to Israel, because it's a very different country, and they still feel that they are very French, very European in a way. And also, so they're kind of scared, because of course it's very scary to move to such a different place during your life. And also, I actually feel like recently that a lot of Jewish people who didn't practice Judaism, or didn't feel really related to their origins, are kind of trying to come back to these Jewish roots, but here in France, as if a new generation was trying to build again a Jewish community based on culture and religion in France. And I've seen a lot of nice initiatives of Jewish young people in France trying not to move to Israel, but to do it in France, from France. So I don't know how it's going to turn out, but I can see that it's changing a little bit already. Now, you should know that here in France today, we have the third biggest Jewish community in the world, after the one in Israel and the one in the United States. It's the biggest one in all of Europe. There are about 500,000 Jews in France today. and it's still the biggest one in Europe.
So then somebody just asked an excellent question. Is Holocaust education mandated in the schools?
Yes, so this is a good question, and it's a good place to ask this question.
Yes, I thought a good place since you're in your spot.
We are at the Holocaust Memorial right now, so you can see here the Jewish star from the Holocaust Memorial. It's actually really nice because you can see how they try to educate everybody right now, because the museums are closed. So they have this outside exhibition, you know, in the street that you can see 24 hours a day. And so it's out there about the Shoah, about Europe and Auschwitz. So you have all these people who can stop and read about the Holocaust, even though the museum is closed this way during the pandemic. You can still, you know, feel like you will, and it's also about the other genocides. So here, for example, the Gypsies. And so, yes, it is mandatory today in school to teach about the Holocaust. So if you are a teacher, you have to teach about the Holocaust in your class. The children will go through the history of the genocide and the Holocaust at least 2 to 3 times during their scholarship. So they would have, they would learn a bit about it already around 10 years old, then again in middle school and again in high school. So here at the Holocaust Memorial, where I also give tours for the children, they come with their schools and they get to see the museum, they get to have a tour, and the country also organizes many trips to Auschwitz to take the children to the camps and show them where the camps used to be. So the Holocaust Memorial today in France has a partnership with the National Education in France. So this way they get to educate the kids, but also other people, like for example, all the French policemen can go through that tour, and they have at least once in their career trip or a tour about the Holocaust. So yes, education about the Holocaust is very, very important today. So now talking about the Holocaust, we are heading towards the Holocaust Memorial. So we were lucky enough to have the right to go inside today, because I really want to show you the wall of names. And I want to talk to you about this very special place, because you should know that the Holocaust Memorial here in Paris is the oldest one that ever existed in the world. So here, see the front of the Holocaust Memorial, and we'll go through the entrance together to see the wall of names. Ah, est-ce que c'est possible de m'ouvrir? Merci. L'autre côté, là-bas, over there. Let's go. Merci. So here we arrived inside. So you can see here a monument which was built in 1956 with the different names of the camps written on it. 1956 is the beginning of this Holocaust Memorial, which is when it started, and when it was the first one ever. It's actually a Holocaust Memorial which is very old, because in 1956 it was built as a real museum here in the heart of Le Marais, but it existed already since 1943. In 1943, in the middle of the war, a group of Jewish men understand already how important it is to keep as many documents, as many pictures as possible about the Jewish people who were deported, because they know that these people will probably never come back. So they think that if they keep pictures and documents, they can already remember what happened to the ones who left. So it's already to remember, but also they keep the documents and the pictures because they want to make sure that if the Nazis lose the war, and in 1943, there is the beginning of the hope that maybe they're going to lose the war because the Nazis lost in Stalingrad, which means that there is hope that they can be defeated. And so they want to keep documents and proofs of what the Nazis did to be able to judge them at trials. You know, you need proofs and documents for that. So they gathered documents, and in 1943, it became already the first Jewish center and documentation, the archive center, the first one ever. And then in 1966, they were able to build this place for the first time. In 2005, it was extended, it became bigger when this wall of names was inaugurated and a museum. So here where we are right now is the wall of names where you can see written the 76,000 names of all the Jews deported from France from 1942. So you can see the year at the top of the walls, 1943 and 1944. Now, when these walls were inaugurated in 2005, they found a little bit later a couple of mistakes because a lot of these names are not French names. So they were difficult for a lot of French people, especially the French policemen who rounded up the Jews to know how to spell the names. And so they made a lot of mistakes. And very recently, it was decided to correct the names if they were spelling mistakes and to rebuild the walls. And last year, in January 2020, our president right now, Emmanuel Macron, was here to inaugurate the new walls of names, where you can see today all these names written. So all the names are written per year of deportation. For example, here 1942, alphabetic order, and then you can see the first name, the last name, and the year when these people were born. So for example, here in 1942, you can see the name of Olga, who was born in 1935. So you can easily know that she was 7 years old because, of course, unfortunately, this genocide was about everybody, the mothers, the fathers, the children, the elderly. Same here, where you can see Marcel Woolman, 1939, deported in 1942. So it's important to be able to see these names today because until 2005, there was no place where you could see the exact names of all the people deported in the Holocaust who were deported from France. It was the first gravestone that some of these families could see. It was the first place ever where they could go to remember them in an individual way. So that's why this place is so important today. And so usually when the museum is open, people can come here, they can put candles or, stones at the bottom of the walls. Now, I wanted to also show you one name here of someone that maybe some of you heard about. So I'll just look for her name. So it's up here on J. I hope that I'm tall enough with my stick to show you her name. So here at letter J, we'll see how high I can go. Okay, over there, maybe you can see the name of Simone Jacob. She was born in 1927, and Simone Jacob is known today as Simone Veil. So Simone Veil was deported in 1944 from France, and she came back from Auschwitz. She's an important survivor and an important woman for France because after the war, when she got married and became Simone Veil, she also became a woman minister for health and then the minister under different governments. She was fighting her whole life for the rights of women, and she was responsible for many, many laws regarding the rights of women. She was also very into teaching about the Holocaust. She became a lawyer as well. And she fought her whole life to make sure that people would know about the Holocaust and would teach the Holocaust in school, for example, and things like this. She passed away a few years ago, and when she died, it was decided by the government that of our president right now, Emmanuel Macron, that she should be buried inside of the Pantheon. The Pantheon is the place where all the very important French people are buried today. So she is buried next to Victor Hugo, next to Voltaire, Rousseau, and all these very important French people. For all these people for whom the country is very grateful for everything they did. So it's quite an honor to think that a Jewish survivor from Auschwitz got such a recognition so many years after what happened to her, but also thinking that for many, many years, the French didn't want to admit what they did to the Jews until 1995, when Jacques Chirac, our president back then, did a speech to admit the French responsibility of what the French did to the Jews. Nobody talks about the French history and how the Jewish government and the French government and the French police was so responsible for deporting the Jews. So do we have any questions about the Wall of Names or the Holocaust Memorial before I leave the building?
Actually, somebody did just ask if all of the people's names who were on the wall, you said they were deported, but now you just gave us an example of somebody who did return. So
Yes.
some of, not every person perished, I would imagine most, but not every. So some people did come back.
Some people did come back. About 4,300 names of these people are the names of survivors. Their names are still written on that wall though, because it was considered when the walls were built that they are also deportees. They are victims of the Holocaust. They were not supposed to come back. So the fact that their names are here show that they were supposed to be with the names of all these people who perished in the Holocaust. The fact that they came back is usually a miracle. I mean, for this woman, for example, Simone, she was deported to Auschwitz. Then she was lucky enough to meet a guy who told her to say that she was 18 years old, to lie about her age, even though she was not 18. So she said she was 18, she was selected to work. And when she was working in the camp, one of the persons who was watching the prisoners there found that she was very pretty. So she told her that she was too pretty to die. And she took her to a place inside where she had a terrible job, but still it was better than being outside. And that's how she was able to survive. Why maybe she wouldn't have survived if she was working, you know, outside. But everything she went through, the fact that she lost her mother, who was with her at the camp, who died, who didn't come back from Auschwitz, everything shows that it's quite a miracle that she survived, and she was not supposed to survive. The Nazis never wanted her to survive. So that's why the names of the survivors are also on the walls.
Well, we'd like to thank you so much, Flora, for your insight and your expertise. And we'd like to thank everyone for joining us this morning. And we hope you've enjoyed your journey to Paris. Do we say au revoir?
In French?
In French. So
yes, au revoir tout le monde. It was a pleasure to be with you today. I'm so sorry that I had to wear the mask the whole time, but you know, that's how it has to be for today. But I hope that maybe one day we can meet in Paris, for real, and without the masks on. And I hope that you enjoyed our tour. And I wish to everybody here today a very happy Passover. I hope that you'll enjoy the holidays and that you can be for some of you with your families as well.
Thank you. And to you, please stay well, and we hope to visit you in person soon. So look in your email for additional meaningful ways to connect with our Federation and our Jewish community during these unprecedented times, including how to make a real difference for those in need by contributing to our annual campaign. Together with our caring community, we thrive. Wishing everyone a happy Passover, stay well, and be safe. Zis and Pesach.